As well as using a counter to control looping, it's also possible to use a condition. In VBA there are two structures which allow this conditional looping. In this video we'll look at the first of these, the DoLoop structure. The DoLoop statement has a couple of different formats, and this means that it's quite a flexible statement. It can be used in place of the for next loop, which we saw in the last video, and also the while when loop, which we'll see in the next video. However, there is one trick that it has, which the other forms of loop don't, and that is it has the ability to ensure that the statements inside the loop will be executed at least once. And it's this unique feature, which the other forms of looping can't do, that we'll focus on in this video. So let's write a macro, and we'll just call it DoLoop statement, and then I'll switch across to procedure view. Now we've seen several times how you can display an input box and get the user to enter some data which you then process. One of the things you can do with a loop is to repeatedly display an input box until the user either clicks the cancel button or enters an appropriate value. So in this example, we'll say that we want the user to enter a company email or click the cancel button. So let's declare a string variable, str email, in which we'll capture the user's email address as string. And let's then define a constant indicating how we want the email address to end. So we'll have const strEnd as string, and then we've got to set it because it's a constant, and let's say it has to end with @ourcompany.com. So let's first of all cater for the cancel button. So here's the basic structure that we'll be looking at. So it's do, then the statements that you want performed, then loop, and you can either use while or until. So you can say loop until a conditional test is true, or loop while a conditional test is true. So let's leave it as while. It makes very little difference for our purposes. So the test that we'll need is that str email is not equal to null string. So we can either put two double quotation marks with nothing between them, or we could use VB null string. And then inside the loop, we'll populate our str email using input box. So let's test it. So if I enter some nonsense, click OK, you'll see back comes the input box. And when I cancel, then this statement ceases to be true. Str email does equal the null string, hence the loop will end. So now we need to change our test into a compound test, because we want to test for two things. We want to test that str email does not equal the null string, and also that str email does not end with this string. A simple way of testing that one string ends with another string is to use the write function. If you've used Microsoft Excel, you may well have come across the functions left and right. So they will read a number of characters starting from the left or starting from the right. The number of characters to be read is obviously the number of characters in this string. We could hard code it. There are 15 characters in the string, so we could just put 15. But it would be better to use a function to do this, so that if this string ever gets changed, the function will still extract the correct length. So we'll need an AND here because we want both conditions to be true. And then it's right. The string that we're looking inside is str email. Length, the number of characters that we want, starting from the right. Instead of 15, we use the len function. And again, you may remember this from using Excel functions. And the thing we want the length of is strEnd. This statement will return the last 15 characters of the email that they've entered, and we now want to compare those characters with strEnd. So we put not equal to strEnd. So in other words, as soon as the last 15 characters of str email are equal to strEnd, then we'll end our loop. So the user now has two ways of ending the loop. They can either click the cancel button and generate the null string, or they can enter a string which ends with @ourcompany.com, and either of those two will cause the loop to end. So let's test it. So again, I'll just put some nonsense, and it's not happy. We know that the cancel button works. So if I just put grant @ourcompany.com, then it's happy. So having received that email from them, let's just do something with it so we can test whether they've actually entered an email or whether they've simply clicked on cancel. So here we can say if and just paste that in. So now that's going to be equal to rather than not equal to. So in other words, now we want to say if str email does end with strEnd, then MSG box, and let's just say it's going to be the report will be emailed to the address ampersand str email. And if, let's just copy that again and then test it. So we save grant @ourcompany.com. The report will be emailed to the address grant @ourcompany.com. So just to point out then, the thing that makes this structure unique is the fact that whatever happens, they will see the input box at least once. It's also legal to put the while at the top. So we could say do while. And of course, if we do, absolutely nothing happens because the test proves to be false from the start. So this line doesn't actually get executed. So this is the style of DoLoop, which is unique among the three different VBA looping formats. The fact that if you put the test with the loop statement rather than the do statement, whatever statements are inside the loop will always be guaranteed to execute at least once. The DoLoop statement has a variety of formats. However, the structure that makes it unique is that it can ensure that the actions inside the loop are performed at least once. To obtain this functionality with the do loop, use the syntax do statements while test condition, or do statements until test condition.